We're live and we're back on Facebook. We had some Facebook difficulties last night, so we're back on Facebook, you guys, and I have Tia Wilson with us today. And she's here. We're gonna get into all of your questions. And she has a new podcast. I'm so excited. Yeah, so, one of my favorite OCD advocates, been following her for a long time before it was even part of NoCD. So I'm really excited to have been chatting with her more. I just love her. So, wanted to bring her here to you guys so that she could give you her perspective on some of your questions. So Tia, why don't you go ahead and, for anyone who doesn't know you, tell them a little bit about yourself, kind of where they can find you, and drop in that podcast for us.
Yes. Okay. You're so cute. I adore you. So I'm so glad to be here with you. Like she said, I'm Tia. I do advocacy just on my own on Instagram mainly. I just started a podcast, like Jenna said. It will cover some OCD topics and some just general wellness and fun topics as well. And yeah, I love to share my story, especially in regards to scrupulosity, because that was probably my biggest theme. And so that's kind of just what I do. I use a lot of different platforms to do that, but I love advocacy work. I think it's so important.
Mm-hmm. So good. And she's so good at it, you guys. Oh my gosh. Like sometimes, people in recovery for OCD, they have like this X factor, like they just get it and they have like this competitive side to them almost, like they just have this fire in them. And I just told Tia the other day, like the OCD doesn't stand a chance with you because I feel like she's very fierce.
You're so sweet. I appreciate
that. So yeah, we will remind you guys too at the end where to find her and definitely where to find her podcast. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jenna Overbaugh. I am a therapist here at NoCD. Been working with this community for the past 10 or 12 years. And I'm normally on Mondays, but I'm taking over and doing it on Tuesday tonight. So I love having the guests on. So luckily with the OCD community, we have so many people who love doing this type of work that there's no shortage of people who want to come on and hang out and chat a little bit about this stuff. So we will go ahead. And I don't go in order, you guys. So if I missed your question, I may come back to it. Okay, this is a unique question. I've never answered this one before on the webinars. So Madeline, what do you think about externalizing the OCD voice in your head? Is it helpful to consider it as something separate from myself, or is it helpful to accept it as part of myself or something else? So I've heard both. For the longest time, I've heard of the encouragement side of trying to externalize it and say like, oh, my OCD told me to do this, or my OCD told me to do that. Definitely more popular and kind of more accepted in the kiddo arena, like with children in particular, kind of having like the OCD monster, so on and so forth. But I've heard other perspectives too about how that deteriorates like your own sense of agency. And so I don't know, I'm open to either side of it, as long as you still understand at the end of the day that the behaviors are choices that you're making, regardless of, you can't necessarily help the urges. You can't help the anxiety or the thoughts that you conjure up. And you can't help the kind of emotional experience behind that, but you can help the behavioral responses to that stuff. And so as long as you understand that, and as long as that hits home, the other parts, if it's helpful, I think that's fine, as long as it doesn't override your autonomy and in your agency when it comes to making these decisions. So Tia, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely with you there. I think whatever helps you to remain responsible for the piece that you're responsible for, while also having self-compassion, because it can be hard sometimes when you are internalizing it, is you're like, this is me. And so I think for me personally, I kind of like to kind of externalize that voice, but still recognize that I'm responsible for responding to it. He's in the car telling me how to drive, but I get to decide how I steer. And so whatever helps you remain in control, like you said, remember that you have agency here. I think that probably the biggest thing that helped me in my OCD recovery is I promised myself I'd never use it as a crutch. I'd never use OCD as a crutch. I'd always be responsible against it. And so, yeah, whatever helps you to do that, I think it's totally personal, and I've seen benefits on both sides.
Yeah, I like doing it for the self-compassion piece, like not totally beating yourself up, like, oh my gosh, these are 100% my choices, and this is 100% a product of my awful, awful choices, because I don't think that that's true. But I do like the word that Tia used, which is responsible. Like, we are responsible for what we do with these difficulties. So yeah, so I love that. And again, like, as long as you are understanding of the big pictures, you know, the need to give yourself that self-compassion, the need to also take responsibility for it, whatever helps you get there,
Definitely. Love that.
And yes, I think definitely for kids more, it's just helpful. Those concepts can kind of go over their heads. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I'm just sharing this because I love when you guys give feedback, and it's actually really good feedback. So I'm just going to highlight it. So someone previously was sharing about their difficulty, like their fear of going crazy, kind of losing control, which is really common and typically experienced in OCD. And I love teaching to the choir how they said, yep, I've had that same theme for a while. What really helped me is saying, yep, probably going to go crazy, definitely going to go crazy. Also giving yourself permission to kind of go crazy. So this is a skill or a concept called like leaning into it. And so, you know, just really just allowing that to be there. Sitting with uncertainty and sitting with anxiety is something you allow. It's not something that you do. So we have to think about all the blocks that we have to allowing that uncertainty, meaning the rituals or the self-assurance, the distraction, the avoidance. And so it's really just allowing all of that to be there. Yeah, what do you think?
I think I used to think of sitting with uncertainty as a very active act. And it wasn't until, I don't remember who said this, someone in the OCD community talked about it being more passive than we often think. You know, just sitting with, yeah, that could happen. You know, it's not, we don't have to seek that out. You just are sitting with that uncertainty. I love that you use the word allow.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, sitting with uncertainty, sitting with anxiety is something you allow. It's not something that you do. Especially working in residential. I worked with so many people, and we would say it all the time, like, sit with it. Sit with it. I don't know. You'll have to sit with it.
Right.
And they would literally get so freaked out. They would take that term so literally that they would feel like they couldn't do their exposures unless they could like sit down.
Right.
It's like, well, exposures have to be more flexible. Like, we have to be more flexible and more applicable than that, right? Like, we're not always going to be able to just stop the world and sit with our anxiety or give the thing our full attention. So it has to be this more of an allowance, passive type of process. And so, yeah, I really like, you know, I always think of it like a math equation. Like, when it comes to exposures or just sitting with situational anxiety, I think of it like so many people want to conceptualize it as like, I'm adding something to that equation. Like, oh, sitting with anxiety, like I'm adding something to the equation, but really you're not really adding anything. You're actually taking something away, meaning the rituals. You're actually taking something away that was never natural supposed to be there in the first place. So as a result of subtracting that portion of the equation, you're now left with a different equation of just allowing something to be there. Usually in the form of some type of question, some type of what if, something that causes you doubt or worry, and your only job is to not fill in the other part of that equation with the different tools.
No, that's a cool way of thinking about it. I like that a lot.
Awesome. Yeah. So lots of people, I mean, this has been coming up a lot. Playboy Boogie, like the name. We get the funniest names. Yeah, this has been coming up a lot, you guys, like in the past couple of days. And so I really want to just shout it out because you guys are not alone. Lots of fears of going crazy, lots of fears of kind of losing control. What if I go crazy, end up on drugs? Feels like everything is my choice and that's overwhelming. And what if it drives me crazy? What if it drives me to be in a mental facility? Like, I think those things are very scary to people who have this type of fear. Fear of kind of losing control, fear of their symptoms worsening, fear of, you know, being so debilitated by their condition that they have to go to some type of mental institution. So those things are all really difficult. And if you look through the chat, I mean, there are lots of other people who resonate with that fear too. So you're definitely not alone.
Totally real.
Yeah. What do you think? Just right off the bat.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one I've struggled with, especially when there's times just naturally where you have not even a relapse, but you just start to, recovery is not a straight line. It's like this. And so I heard a friend call it a blip when her OCD would go into almost a relapse. And that helped me to conceptualize it as like, okay, we're in a blip right now. But whenever I was in a blip, I'd have that fear come back of like, okay, what if I spiral out of control? And it gets to that point where I'm, I think especially working in the mental health field, I was like, I have to, be the advocate or be the mentor and not the person who's going back into relapse or going and getting to this really extreme state. It's very real. I just want to validate how real that emotion is and how hard it is to sit with. But that's what you got to do. Like I said, is you sit with it.
And something that typically, I mean, it might be helpful. Sometimes people don't read about these as much, but they can be really helpful if there's something that trigger you. So you could always look into what we call interoceptives. So there are interoceptive exercises that are kind of like body exposures. There are things like spinning around in a chair or shaking your head back and forth, tensing all of your muscles, holding your breath, rapidly breathing. And so what those will do, they're not effective for everybody. They're not triggering to everybody. But if you're someone who has a fear of going crazy and kind of losing control, those symptoms might be associated with those sensations for you. And so those might be helpful treatment interventions or exposures. So you could definitely look up interoceptives. They work the same way as other exposures. They're just more to elicit that fear and that physiological sensation that accompanies anxiety. So again, like heartbeat racing, shortness of breath. And then the rationale behind that is not that you spin in a chair and you don't get dizzy, because if we spin in a chair, everyone's going to get dizzy, right? It's just this concept that like I can experience fleeting feelings of dizziness or shortness of breath or my heartbeat racing, and I control whether I conjure up all these additional thoughts about that. Yeah. And you can come to learn that while those thoughts and while those experiences might be uncomfortable, they're not necessarily dangerous. And they're maybe not even as uncomfortable or as intolerable as you once thought they were.
No, I love those. I think another exposure that I did a lot with this was just going to group therapy. Because for me, I was like, I'm sitting with all these people and they all are all struggling. Like we're going to all spiral together. It can be overwhelming a little bit, but it was such an exposure to be there and it was a good exposure that also helped me, in a group therapy setting. But I know a lot of people avoid group therapy for that same fear of what if I grab onto someone else's theme or just, start to get worse and worse and worse.
Like that emotional stickiness, like somehow now I'm going to have their symptoms and I don't want to open myself up to that. I don't want to expose myself to that because what if now I develop those symptoms? And so just like anything else, right? We want to, if you're avoiding it, that means you probably need to be approaching it.
Definitely.
I know you're going to have thoughts and feelings about this. Thoughts and feelings.
Yes.
Daily Art Grind always has really solid questions. So shout out to Daily Art Grind.
Yeah, I think,
go ahead.
Like kind of a really big one because I think genuinely so many of these coaches have good intentions, but there's a huge difference between intention and having the information to actually cause results. And I mean, it's even, you could just answer it as simple as the fact that their coaching style hasn't been researched, whereas exposure response prevention has. Like, even if that's, all I said on the topic, that's enough to me. I think, I don't know. Again, I think most of the time their intentions are good, but I would definitely be wary of that. And, and call them out. I think that's something I haven't been shy at doing is calling out coaches and talking. I've had a lot of discourse with those coaches because a lot of the times when you aren't coming at a problem, even if you have the life experience, if you aren't coming at the problem from a standpoint of research and information, there's a whole lot of risk of causing harm to people.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I try to believe that they had good intentions. We're just, misinformed, and they're also doing so much damage. Oh my gosh. Like,
when you're a therapist, you have other people to keep you in check. You have like laws to keep you in check. There's so much regulating your actions, but as a coach, you can do whatever you want and no one gets to regulate it. So there's just risk in that regard too.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, yeah, that is one of the big major issues and one of the big differences between therapists and coaches, not just the level of education and everything else that kind of goes into that, but therapists, like licensed professional counselors or licensed marriage and family counselors, we are all guided by a board of directors, and there are very strict laws. So much so that like I can't even practice outside. Like I can't even see someone in Michigan. I can't see someone in Florida, even though I am perfectly capable of treating their OCD, because I am not licensed in those states. I can't see those individuals. So in some ways, like we would actually argue that we're kind of overregulated.
Yeah.
But coaches, yeah, I mean, we have to do continuing education credits. We have to. We're constantly getting, we could be kind of under review at any time. And so coaches, yeah, they have no regulatory board at all. And so they kind of have the ability to be able to do whatever it is that they want, to basically to get your money or to make their business. So first of all, I think anything that's related to mental health and OCD in particular, saying that there's a cure is just like red alarm to me.
Yeah.
Red alarm. Like it just shouts business tactic to me, because it's obviously such a debilitating disorder. It's so the treatment for ERP, I think one of the reasons why ERP is so tricky for people who have OCD is people with OCD have been shown, and we know this by the nature of their rituals, they like short-term instant gratification, right? ERP is like the opposite of instant gratification.
Yes.
So they're having to be really patient. You're having to go against everything that you know to be true. It's very counterintuitive, and you're having to put your stake in these long-term benefits that may or may not come. And so it's not for the instant gratification peeps. So what is your instant gratification peeps is cure and drink this celery juice and da 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 da. And so that obviously seems so much more appealing than you need to commit yourself and make this new lifestyle. You're not going to get rid of your intrusive thoughts. We're just going to help you accept them. And it's going to take a lot of behavioral effort on your part, and you're going to have to take responsibility. Like, who the heck wouldn't want a cure? Right?
Yeah, like the magic bullet that just fixes everything.
That would be so great.
Like, I do want to validate that too, because I think coaches, a lot of what they do often relies on reassurance. And so it's so easy to feel that attachment or understanding, or like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. And at the beginning of my journey, there was an OCD coach who now I have a lot of problems with, but at the time I just was like, oh, like everything he's posting is so like spot on and so validating. And so if you feel that attachment to a coach, don't beat yourself up over that. They're appealing to something that's really hard that you're going through, and they're trying to validate it. And so I would just encourage you to seek that in a forum that has the information and the research behind it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, I mean, if they're not doing exposure and response prevention, you could have the best coach, this is what Nathan Peterson was on last night, and we answered a question similar to this. Someone was asking about like psilocybin and mushrooms and hypnosis, and do these all help with the anxiety or OCD process? And we were pretty much like, you know what, like we don't know what the research says about those things. We do know what the research says about exposure and response prevention. Nothing else even holds a candle to it as far as we're concerned, right? So it is going to take effort. It is scary, but if you're doing it with the right guidance and the right feedback and the right encouragement, the right community, which is all of those things are available to you, then you're going to get a lot of good bang for your buck. Like I said, you could have the best psychiatrist, the best medication, the best hypnosis, the best OCD coach, the best celery juice, the best whatever, insert whatever here. Right. If you're not implementing some level of exposure and response prevention, whether that's with an awesome therapist or whether it's with a self-guided course, like one that Nathan Peterson offers or whatever it is that you can kind of get your hands on, if there's not an element of ERP, it's not going to be sustainable. It's kind of like a diet where you're just eating carbs and fat. Like you need the protein. Like You need the protein. You need the protein in whatever form, and that's going to be ERP to really truly be sustainable. Awesome. Hi, Jenna. Because of you, I'm doing a lot better. You helped me get better. I'm so thankful. I even found an OCD therapist. I am so happy. I am so happy. Madeline says this was really helpful. I like this. I feel like you'll like just nail this freaking question.
Yes, this is a big one.
I know you're getting good questions tonight, you guys. My goodness, I'm getting lots of good questions that like I haven't seen before and that aren't reassurance, that are like applicable to everybody. So I'm having a good time over here. Yeah. So, okay. I know we always say values over fear, which we do. It's really a good guiding light for treatment. We would always kind of suggest like, okay, making sure that you're making decisions based on your values versus your fear. So how do we establish values when OCD is yelling, those aren't your values? Such a great question, because OCD can make you doubt that stuff, right? What do you think, Tia?
Yeah, so at the beginning of my OCD treatment, a little bit of background, I did 4 months of intensive outpatient therapy doing exposure response prevention. And I didn't do any values work during that time. Because for me, that would be a compulsion. I would really fixate on values and always checking, is this exposure I'm doing in alignment with my values? And so I didn't do values work until way far after that. And kind of embrace the uncertainty that, like it's really hard for me to tell at this moment what exactly my values are. And so I just kind of, I guess my therapist helped me a lot to kind of guide me toward just really normal, decent human values. And it's only been recently that I've been able to actually do values work and prioritize them. But for other people, doing the values work alongside the exposure response prevention can be super, super helpful. And I think a lot of the time through exposures, especially for me with my scrupulosity, I was able to figure out what my values were as I went through those exposures. But that's such a good question. I feel, yeah. What do you think about it?
I have some thoughts, and I'm just trying to. So Nolan asked, can I share this link to the talk with a friend who has OCD but doesn't have the app? Absolutely. So these videos are available on our Facebook. They're available on our YouTube. They're all saved. So you could go back, and as long as it wasn't a ritual, you could go back and watch tons of videos. So yes, they're available to everyone. This is not like a OCD app specific thing. And then someone asked our names. I'm Jenna Overbaugh. This is Tia Wilson. Nathan is here. Hi, Nathan. Hi. Oh my gosh. I'm having so much fun tonight. I'm having so much fun. Oh my gosh. So values work. I love everything that Tia said. I also think that it's really important to do, because as you reduce the preoccupation that OCD holds in your mind, OCD is taking up a lot of space, right? Like I guarantee, even if you guys aren't depressed, even if you guys don't recognize that as depression, chances are because of your OCD or your anxiety, you've reduced or stopped doing a lot of activities that you value, a lot of activities that you are just routine, like brushing your teeth, showering, paying bills, whatever. You've also reduced or stopped doing a lot of enjoyable activities like puzzles or meditating or going for walks. So as you do exposure therapy, again, whether this is with a therapist or with a really great self-guided course, like the one that Nathan provides, he's here, OCDandAnxietyOnline.com.
So good.
And so as you reduce that preoccupation in your brain, that OCD is kind of filling up, that's great. But if you don't reinfuse that with good valued activities and hobbies and enjoyable activities and routine activities, I think people can get bored and not know what to do with themselves. And as a result, they can kind of really struggle. Kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do with my time now? Like I remember working with someone on reducing their shower routines and the hygiene routines so much that he had like 8 hours left in his day. And he was like, I don't know what to do with myself now. I don't know what to do with myself now. And so, it would have been better timed, we did it eventually, but it would have been better timed for us to have identified those valued activities and those enjoyable activities as he was gradually getting back that time, right? Because 8 hours where you like suddenly get your life back is great, but it can also be really daunting and really scary. Like, I don't want, you don't want people to just kind of be sitting around doing nothing. Because what do we do when we sit around and do nothing but ruminate and feel awful, right? So I think identifying your values, identifying valued activities, identifying enjoyable activities that you've reduced or stopped doing. I think identifying routine activities that you've reduced or stopped doing. Again, it can be as simple as like cleaning your house. It can be something as simple as paying your bills, mowing your lawn. Like routine activities are just things that we all need to do as functioning individuals, but we don't really like to do them. I think identifying those things and trying to schedule time for those things. And it might feel a little bit like an exposure. Like, I really don't feel like mowing my lawn today, but you need to mow your lawn today, right? So kind of the same principles would apply. Doing the difficult things, even when you feel like you don't want to do them, especially when you feel like you don't want to do them.
Yeah.
And then, oh my gosh, I think those make the best exposures, by the way. Like, those are my favorite exposures ever.
Oh yeah.
I think values can often be a really good, what's the word that I'm thinking of? Values can often be a really good like foot in the door technique when it comes to exposure work. So I'll give you guys an example. So one time I was working with someone who was terrified of like chemical contamination. So everything had to be 100% all organic toothbrush, which I didn't even know they made these things, all organic food, all organic outfits, all organic, so on and so forth, all organic everything, like all organic clothes, which again, I didn't even know that you could make that, but it was all like all black, all white clothes because it all had to be 100% organic cotton or whatever. And so this person was not interested in learning how to use non-organic toothpaste. She wasn't interested in learning how to use non-organic laundry detergent, right? Like, she was maybe 20, what just wasn't something that interested her. It was one of those routine things like, cool, who wants to learn how to do their laundry? Who wants to learn how to like brush their teeth differently? Wasn't really that motivating. But this person bought a really beautiful dress from Target that clearly was not 100% organic, right? And she just loved fashion. And so I was like, I'm going to get her to do exposures with this freaking dress.
Yeah.
And so after weeks of failed attempts and power struggles and education and motivation difficulties and whatever, she refused to do anything else. Like, she wasn't motivated by it, but she really, really wanted to wear this dress. And so we literally started by having her like touch the bottom of the dress. And then we had her like hold on to the dress. And then we had her, put the dress on top of her lap over her pants. And then we had her step into the dress. And then we had her pull it up halfway her torso or halfway up her legs. And then we had her actually put it on. And so the moral of the story there is sometimes values can be really great exposures. Like, in that way, it helped motivate her to get going on exposures. And once she realized that that could work, we still worked on value stuff, but then we realized, yeah, you also have to learn how to use different laundry detergent and stuff too. And she was more willing to do that. I love this question because I think values are so important in the kind of just overall recovery process. And they can also just help complement that process really, really nicely.
Yeah, I think my values are what got me in the door to therapy, even though I didn't recognize it at the time, because I hadn't like written out, this is what I value. But I was wanting to get back to life and friendships and all those things that I valued. And that's what got me in the door to therapy. I think that it's also okay to recognize that there's going to be times where you might not be able to tell the difference between your values or your OCD. And you're going to have to take a risk. Like, for instance, I was vegan at the time, and I wasn't sure if I was vegan because of my values or because of my OCD. And so I just had to take the risk, and I was like, I'm going to stay vegan. And we'll find out later, as we go about the process. But I think there is a level of uncertainty there that is okay to sit with as well, that maybe we're going to have to continue to learn about our values. It's not a one-time thing. All of us as humans are having to continuously learn and reprioritize what our values are. And I think that's a good thing to sit with.
Yeah, that's such a good example. I think there are probably so many different examples of that. Like the vegan thing, I think is a really good one. Like I think a lot of times people get tripped up on like preference. Like, do I prefer to do things this way?
Right.
Or do I need to do things this way? Like, do I prefer to be vegan? Value? Or do I need to be vegan because otherwise XYZ is going to happen and I'm going to be, blasphemous or, feel guilty about it forever and not know if I've done wrong or whatever the fear was, right? So, that might be helpful in clarifying that distinction too, is just, is it a preference because you want to and it makes you feel good and you feel okay about that? Or is it a need? Like, I need to do things this way, otherwise X, Y, and Z is going to happen. Usually if there's a need and there's some sort of urgency and there's some type of consequence, if you were to veer, otherwise, that's different. And think about flexibility too, right? Like, even if Tia was more leaning towards like, yeah, I think I just prefer to be vegan, but I'm still not 100% sure. Like, what about, I think it calls for us to be flexible too.
Yeah.
Let's say that she accidentally ate something that didn't have all vegan ingredients, right? Or that there was she was out at a wedding or something. I don't know, just flexibility, right? Like, could you be flexible with that? Like, how would you handle that?
Yeah, I think one part of that flexibility for me was recognizing that my values were going to change as I went through exposures, because again, a lot of mine was in regards to religion. And so I was like, I think I have the same values as my religion, but I don't know. And so a huge part of it for me, I just was like, I'm going to go off the values that my mom taught me. And then as I go and, continue doing exposures, I started to shift and be like, actually, I'm going to shift a little bit this way. And actually my values are more prioritized here. But it was helpful for me to have kind of that foundation of like, I'm just going to use the values my mom taught me and we'll see where we go from here. And then have that flexibility to later readjust those and realign those as I started to learn what my preferences were through exposures, which is new. I feel like I wasn't used to going off what I liked or my preferences before I did exposures. I was like, there always had to be a reason behind things. And it was really interesting to learn that, no, you can just do something because you like it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned that in the group the other night. Like that learning knowing yourself. And I think relevant to this conversation too, like, it's not this like North Star or recovery, I think you were talking about, right? Yeah. Like, it's not this North Star that you like get to and you achieve and you made it, right? Like, totally. It's literally this continually evolving process. And we need to be okay with that. We need to be, who has a good podcast about that is, she wrote Untamed.
Oh,
it's right on the tip of my tongue. Guys, who wrote Untamed?
Yeah, someone say in the chat.
Oh my God, it's going to bother me so bad.
I'm like, guys, I
really want you all to tell me who wrote it, but I want to figure it out myself.
I'm like trying to look it up.
Oh my gosh. But anyway, she has a podcast. And Glennon Doyle.
Yeah, Glennon Doyle. Yep.
Glennon Doyle. Just came to me. Podcast. And I think it's the very, very first episode. And Kara, thank you. She has a great episode. She is very open about her anxiety experience. And what she says is in the first episode is just like, I think it's called, Is It Love or Is It Holding Your Breath? The title makes sense as you listen to the episode, but she basically talks about how anxiety signals to us that like we really, really love something. Like she was saying how she gets really anxious about her children and like it's really scary that you could love them that much. And she had a really good quote. I totally lost my train of thought now that I remembered her name. What did she say? Tia, where was I?
We were talking about continuous healing.
Oh, she realized eventually that she was not going to like ever have a cure for her anxiety. Like she said that she eventually like she stopped holding her breath. like she stopped holding her breath, that like she was going to live completely free of this, and that she could have a hopeful life, and that she could go on and live a very satisfying life and a very fulfilling life, and she could be in recovery and recover, but that she was never going to be like zapped of her anxiety. And so she said that there was a time where she like stopped holding her breath for that. And I thought that was really powerful. Like,
I love that.
it does feel like you can take a breath, like that you can just let go of that breath, because you're kind of holding on to it. We want it to be this like North Star type of situation, but there was another question about that. So maybe that'll be a good transition. Thank you for helping me find my footing. I got so stuck on the name. I was like, I don't remember what she said. That was so great in the first place. Can we still, related to what we were just talking about, can we still live a happy life with OCD? Can we still love, laugh, be free, hang out with friends, and not fall into stereotypes? I just want to forget everything and be free. So this is what we've been talking about. And I do 100% believe that from lived experience, from professional experience, everything that I've done and seen and worked with, that you can absolutely go on and live a happy life with OCD. I think in some ways, you know, I think it's a spectrum, right? Like a lot of people are in the zone where they hate their OCD. And like you're saying, you want to forget everything. You just want rid of it. You just want rid of it. You just want rid of it.
I've definitely been there.
Yeah. And I can see why, right? Like it is awful, you know, especially when you're in the thick of it and you just got diagnosed, or maybe you're not even diagnosed yet and you're still in that zone where you have a lot of questions that aren't answered, and it's really difficult. I think sometimes people, like once they've been in advocacy for a while and they've seen the benefits of treatment and they've come out the other side, they can have this like radical gratitude about kind of their experiences, and they see the gifts that OCD has brought them. Like for instance, I struggled being alone with my son. Like that was always a really big trigger for me. And I just always wanted to be able to be alone with him. Like I just always wanted, like other moms, to be able to be alone with my son. Now I love being alone with him. We actually have a trip planned in 2 weeks. We're going to go like on just a mommy and me vacay, just the two of us. And like, I'm going to appreciate that so much more than like any other mom would, because I've known the darkness. Like I've known what it felt like to want that. And so I feel like I'm going to appreciate it that much more. And so it took a long time to get to that point. And there was a time where I didn't think that I ever would get to that point. But I don't think that you can't jump from hating OCD to being in like radical gratitude for it. I think just getting to the point where you can allow it and be like, not actively fight it off, and have the strategy of accepting and having a different relationship with it versus the strategy of get rid of. Because ultimately that strategy, while it makes sense, and I feel for that, it just breathes oxygen into the fire of OCD.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, sometimes you have to redefine what happy life means to you. Because for me, it meant having no OCD, being totally perfect and having no flaws and all the friends and all the love. Like I had this very idealized version of what my happy life would look like. And I've had to take a step back and be like, no, what does a happy life actually mean to me? Like, what is it? Who am I surrounded with? You know, and kind of reframe, because perfection is not the same as happiness. And then I also think I had to mourn the OCD. And I feel like it wasn't until I sat there and was like, okay, because I've had OCD since I was 3. I've experienced almost all the themes, very severe case. And I had to sit there and mourn some of the things that I've lost before I could like start to heal from them. And I think I didn't allow myself to do that until a year after I went through the intensive OCD program I did. And then it all hit me when Corona hit. And I had to take a second and just really sit with that and mourn, because you miss out on a lot. And I think now that I've been able to, again, mourn those things, I'm able to have a happy life. Like I really do feel like my life is happy right now. And it's not the same perfection, happy life that I thought it would be. But again, perfection isn't the same as happiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's different, but different's not always a bad thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I, from a more like professional perspective, I think that if we break down, like, so talking about recovery makes me really want to break down the diagnostic criteria, because I'm a nerd. So if we're looking at recovery, like from a specific lens, right? Like we've talked about our own lived experiences and our lived opinions about that. But if we look at it from a professional standpoint too, like a very therapeutic standpoint, in the DSM, OCD is constituted of obsessions and compulsions. Obsessions being these intrusive thoughts, ideas, images, or impulses or feelings that are repetitive and recurrent and distressing. Then we obviously have those compulsions too. So compulsions being behavioral or mental in nature. And so there are other aspects too that I'll get to, but there's a big push to even like get rid of the intrusive thought aspect of the definition of OCD. Because research shows that we all have intrusive thoughts, right? So no matter your socioeconomic status, no matter where you're at throughout the country, throughout the world, people experience intrusive thoughts. Research shows that 95 to 99% of individuals say they experience intrusive thoughts. I think the other 1 to 5% of people are totally lying, or they just don't understand the question. We all have those neurological junk thoughts that come in out of our awareness and are kind of strange and just don't make sense.
Yeah.
That can potentially be misinterpreted as being significant. So as long as we need our recovery to include the absence of compulsions and the absence of intrusive thoughts, if that's how we are looking at recovery, I have to be free from compulsions and I have to be free from intrusive thoughts. I don't think that that's possible. I don't think that that's possible for any of us, because I don't think that we will ever, as humans, until we have the ability to literally go in your brain and turn that aspect of it off, which we don't have yet, and I don't think that we will. We're not going to get rid of intrusive thoughts. And so I think if we want to have a more hopeful view of OCD recovery, I think we need to reorganize our kind of understanding of what it means to have OCD and be recovered from OCD, right? So I don't think we can get rid of intrusive thoughts. So what we can be responsible to, which again is the word that I love Tia used, we are responsible for the behaviors. We are responsible for our behavioral reaction to those urges. I do believe 100% that people can live a life where they are not ritualizing. I think we might have the tendency to be pulled in that direction. I think we may slip up every once in a while. I slip up every day. But that brings me to the other diagnostic criteria. Other diagnostic criteria for OCD means technically you have to spend more than an hour a day. Obviously, that's dependent on the overall context of the situation, but generally we look for an hour plus a day. And big important item here, the major items are distress and impairment. So do these symptoms cause you distress, and do they cause you impairment? Are they interfering with some activity or activities of your daily life? That's the key. So if you guys can get to the point where you are reducing your rituals to the extent where your OCD is no longer impairing your life, to the extent where it's no longer something that distresses you on a daily basis, you 100% can recover.
Yeah, no, I think building off the professional side of things, a personal example of recovery is today. I had a crazy day. I just came back from the doctor's. It was to the point where I was unbuckling my seatbelt as I parked my car, running in the house to come do this live. So I'm my hair is crazy. I don't have makeup on. And normally I was having all these intrusive thoughts oh my gosh, people are going to not trust you because of it. Just all these intrusive thoughts coming in and then, and I'm here. And that's as simple as it gets. I'm still here with someone who I love and care about so much, being able to connect with all of you guys and do something that really makes me feel alive. I feel very passionate about OCD advocacy and I love talking about it. And I'm not letting those intrusive thoughts or the urge to go and ritualize and go. Probably a year or two ago, I would have canceled, because I'm no, I'm not looking my best. It's not working out, but I'm here. And that's, I think what for me, that's what recovery looks like. And it's something, it was worth it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Tia's recovery example right there, it's not that she didn't have urges, that's okay, but she made decisions and she did not let OCD make those decisions for her as far as whether she would show up here today. So yeah, absolutely, that's possible for all of you. Yeah. And the biggest in the research, again, nerd, The biggest correlation between maintenance of long-term gains, meaning like how long even after therapy and how consistently do you maintain your recovery, it comes down to one factor more consistently and more reliably than any other factor, and that is ritual prevention.
Yeah.
So meaning that what that means is regardless of your motivation for treatment, regardless of the quality of your treatment, regardless of whether you're on medications or not, regardless of your subtype, regardless of whether you have other disorders, research shows that the one kind of reigning highest relationship between some concept and ability to maintain long-term gains, even post-treatment, so even after you're out of treatment, it comes down to ritual prevention. How consistently you are resisting your rituals. Doesn't come down to your subtype, doesn't come down to really anything else. You can override a lot of difficulties in your treatment. You can override a lot, the presence of other disorders. You can override, maybe a therapist who only has 2 years of ERP experience under the belt. If you have good response prevention, good ritual prevention, you can, override some of those other difficulties. Let's do one more quick question. And then we'll remind everyone where to find Tia. And then we'll be good. This is making me cry because it's so helpful. I want to cry and hug you all. That is really, really
cute. Oh, there's so many of these comments. I just my heart just goes out to, and I just want to give you all a big hug. I
know.
Yeah.
I know. Awesome. All right. So I think this one is something that a lot of people could probably resonate with, and there's a rather easy explanation for it. So why does my OCD fluctuate? Some months I have more compulsions than other times, and I think it can fluctuate in different ways for different people. So sometimes their obsessions will be completely different. I meet with so many people who say like, I feel like I got a vacation from OCD for the past couple of months, and now all of a sudden it's back. Like, what the heck? And the whack-a-mole situation can really frustrate people too. Like, I was really worried about scrupulosity, and now all of a sudden I'm worried about intrusive thought, like sexual intrusive thoughts. Like, what the heck? Long story short, OCD plays these very reliable and predictable tricks. OCD also follows generally what we call a waxing and waning course when you're not in treatment or doing that active treatment. So it waxes and it wanes, meaning it can kind of go away without explanation for a little bit. And sometimes people mistake that for recovery. But generally it comes back, especially if you're not applying an active treatment to it. So yeah, and subtypes too. It's just another characteristic trick. I think of it like my son, if my son asks me for a lollipop for breakfast and I say no, the first thing he's going to want to do is go and ask dad. He's just trying to get it from some other source. So what we need to make sure that we do is my husband and I need to make sure that we have consistent messaging, right? So it's just this source, this desire, trying to get it from some other manifestation, some other, your OCD wants certainty. It wants some resolution of that doubt. It wants to get rid of that aversive anxiety experience. And so it's just when it goes to different themes like that, it's just simply trying to get lollipop from dad instead. And so as long as you have consistent messaging regarding how you respond to your subtypes, you'll be able to, quell the OCD a little bit more in that way. It's going to still be obnoxious. Maybe it's still going to go and ask dad every once in a while, but as long as you have consistent messaging, you're setting yourself up for success in the future. Any last thoughts about this, Tia, before we wrap up?
No, I love that. I think that there's so many reasons why. It could be hormonal. It could be you might have PAN or PANDAS, or, it's cyclic. There's so many different things, and it's really easy to get caught up in trying to figure out and diagnose why. That's not always helpful, but, like Jenna said, the part you do have control over is your consistency. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So many things, life changes, sometimes people's OCD, like it gets really bad. Like their symptoms get really bad when they're stressed. Sometimes I feel like when they are stressed, their OCD symptoms almost like go away because they kind of have other things to deal with. It's totally personal. And there's never going to be like an exact prescription for why. So like Tia said, I would focus on okay, what am I going to do about that? And like, how am I going to address it?
Yeah, managing your vulnerability factors year round, even on the good times, I always have to still check in with myself, and am I taking care of myself, eating, all those things, even when feel like my OCD is good, the consistency, it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, remind us once again, and again, this will be recorded, you guys, in case you need to go back and see where you can find her, or definitely share with your loved ones. Tia, tell us where they can find you, and name drop your podcast one more time.
Yeah, so the main place you can find me is on Instagram. I'm just at Tortilla Wilson, and I do a lot of different posts there about living with OCD, and then I have a podcast as well that I talk some about. I just started it, so there's only a couple episodes, but I talk about mental health and OCD, and then just some other fun random stuff, and it's called No Thanks in Advance, and there's a link to it on my Instagram too. So
I love it.
Yeah, I'm so grateful I got to come and be here, and that I didn't let my OCD foil me and keep me away.
Yeah, it was really good. This was one of my, I feel like I say that every time. I don't mean to say that every time. I mean it every time. I feel like they just keep getting better and better. So yeah, you guys had awesome questions this time. You were all super supportive of each other, and we love that. Spoiler alert, you may see more of Tia. Just saying. Just saying. Try to get Tia more involved here. So
I'd love to.
Little tease there. So thank you guys so much. Make sure you come back for more videos. I don't think I'm coming back tomorrow. I think I'm done this week. I'm done this week. So you guys get a break from me. Thank you, Tia, so much for coming on. Yeah. And thank you guys for your wonderful questions. I will see you next week. Bye.